Hey, everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to shift gears a little bit and we're going to talk about the past and future box. But before we go into the chapter, I wanted to share with you something which I thought might be helpful in reading through and deciphering, picking out these clues that are in the book. As you know, JCB uses a lot of wordplay. He also uses other ways of hiding these clues, and I thought this is a pretty neat technique that is often used with magicians that do really basically the same thing that JCB is doing in this book. So bear with me a little bit, and I want to talk a little about cognitive loading. If you're not familiar with it, but magicians use cognitive loading. They overload your brain with information, just causing you to unconsciously focus on what someone wants you to focus on and miss other things. A good example of this is, during a stage show, a magician would ask the audience, hey, does anyone have a handkerchief? So the audience attention now focuses on themselves, wondering if they have a handkerchief or looking to the left or right of them, seeing if the person sitting next to them has one. Meanwhile, the magician does their sleight of hand while the attention is off them. They often also use magicians that is will use an attractive looking assistant to redirect your focus. So I'm not saying that JCB is doing that per se, but there's a lot of different misdirection and clever ways magicians use, as well as what John could be using in his book. So you have, a, a verbal misdirection. Well, in this case, it's the verbal voice in your head when you're reading his chapter. They tell a story or make a statement that diverts your attention away from where the secret action is taking place. This could be this could be used during his stories. He's really front loading a lot of information, and what drew me to this idea was reading the past and future box. It is loaded with a lot of information, and we could discuss that later on when we talk about the chapter. But I think that can be one of his methods of throwing us off a little bit. He could also use exploiting cognitive biases, and he talks about this. He actually does. So when these mental shortcuts our brains use, it creates biases and illusions that really challenge our expectations. So this chapter, like I said, has a lot of stuff in it, and maybe that's what JCB intentionally did. We'll seek out the answers to that and more, but let's just take a look at the chapter at a whole. So the chapter overview is this is a high level view at the chapter, and then we'll get into the different components of it. Covering the past and future box. This is what he does in the beginning of the chapter. He states that this chapter is about a box that is tied to both the past and the future. He goes on to say, it's composed of Bitcoin and NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, which, if you're not familiar with those, they're unique digital assets that exist on a blockchain. They represent ownership of one-of-a-kind items, and both digital and physical. So in this case, it would be what John says, that he'll make an NFT based on the treasure box and all the contents for you. He goes on to talk about Ready Player One. So that's the book that inspired him on this hunt. So Ready Player One, um, in the book, Earth is a dystopia plagued by poverty and corporate dominance, leading millions to escape into this virtual world called Oasis. And after the creator of that dies, he leaves behind a series of 1980s themed clues hidden in Oasis, with the promise that whoever finds the secret Easter egg will inherit the $1 trillion company. JCB then goes on and talks about the games of his childhood that reminds him of Ready Player One, and used to solve the location of where his treasure box is hidden. And that is the word search in the cryptogram that's in the back of the chapter. So that's a high level view at the chapter. Next, we'll go into the treasure box. So here John's talking about the treasure box. He uses these words to describe the looks of the treasure box, um, as well as recalling his conversation he had with the creator of the treasure box, Seth Gould. He looked out in the inviting sunny day through the window of his home office. It harbors a technological treasure or two that I had acquired, along with some other unique and valuable items. This sleek and elegant work of art arrived at my doorstep in California. This treasure box is crafted from steel, carbon, steel, stainless steel, and brass, and it harkens to a world yet to come. So that's a high level on the treasure box. Next, we'll discuss the Bitcoin and NFT section of this chapter. So in this section, he talks about the Bitcoin and the NFT. Introduction of the especially appropriate object inside the box. It's a digital asset born just 15 years ago. He goes on the overview of Bitcoin's philosophy and origins. He states it's independent of banks and institutions, tied to the future of tech and AI. He then starts us off with a quote from Satoshi Nakamoto, which suggests philosophical and revolutionary intent. He goes on to explain the mining protocol, which was a 2009 launch, in which blocks solved by competitive miners in large server farms. He then transitions to physical representations of the Bitcoin. He says, despite being digital, they have private keys that can be stored physically, which are hidden behind a hologram on the coin. Then he introduces us to the Cascacious coins. I believe that's how you pronounce it. If that's not, maybe leave a comment and let me know how it is pronounced. He said, it's a first and foremost brand of a physical Bitcoin that was discontinued in 2013, which really emphasizes the valuation and rarity of these Cascacious coins. He says they have premium value, especially if they're fully loaded. So the coin itself is intrinsically valuable, and then when you load it with the Bitcoin behind it, it increases even more. He goes on to state the coin inside the box, inside this treasure box, is gilt silver with a quality of a 68 out of 70 rating. He says protected by a hologram, holding digital Bitcoin with intact private keys. He then mentions of multiple fully loaded coins in the overall treasure. So possibly in other boxes, he doesn't get too specific on how many, but he does say at least one is placed inside this box. So we're hoping there is more than one. I would venture to say he is if he's saying at least one, right? And then JCB talks about his plan for digital NFT documentation. Originally, he wanted to create NFTs for each item in the box, but he had a delay of the NFT plan due to the uncertainty about which NFT provider he can trust at the time. So there's an optional NFT creation in the future if the finder wants. JCB will mint NFTs using original photos. So next, we'll discuss at a high level Ready Player One part of this chapter. So in this section of the chapter, he talks about the book Ready Player One. JCB reflects on the futuristic treasure box in his office. Um, he says its surface would reflect the state of gold. Um, it, it it's a poetic observation that connects sunlight and value, possibly alluding to California, the Golden State, and a deeper symbolism of light, truth, and discovery. But um, we don't know yet. We'll get into more details later on. He does mention thinking about Ready Player One while looking at this box. This is, a direct link he made between the box and the futuristic themes in the novel. He summarizes a plot of Ready Player One. He calls it a dystopian Earth controlled by tech and plague and poverty. Oasis as a dominant virtual escape. James Halliday's death and the inheritance challenge. James Halliday being the character in the book. The hidden Easter egg leads to the ultimate ownership. He highlights the treasure hunt aspects. He goes, it's the most valuable treasure hunt in human history. He then mentions Ernest Cline's 1980s nostalgia and birth year, which is similar to John Collins Black's birth year. He links the fictional and real authors to a common cultural upbringing, right? So he then closes with emphasis on the unexpected simplicity of the clues. He goes, despite the futuristic tech, the treasure is accessed through nostalgia. And from there, he transitions into the games. So in the game section of the chapter, which is towards the end now, Oasis players solve clues through 80s game and trivia. He mentions specific games such as Pac-Man, Adventure, Zork, Dungeons and Dragons, films such as War Games, which is one of my favorite movies, Monty Python, which is also one of my favorite as well, Monty Python and the Holy Grail. JCB connects personally to this nostalgia. Ready Player One, he says, was like experiencing my own childhood again. He draws a line between his childhood, Halliday's, and Cline's. He was then inspired to use his own childhood games in the treasure hunt. So after reading Ready Player One, he thought, wouldn't it be great if I used my own games that I played in childhood in this treasure hunt? He then reflects admiration for Cline, but humbly claims he's not a genius. He introduces the first game, which is a word search. He describes it as something you can excel at. He jokes it's not as fun or imaginative as the classic games, but accessible. Introduces a second game, the cryptogram. This was inspired by him watching his grandfather solve puzzles tied to family memories, such as his grandparents sitting in lawn chairs counting traffic. He offers it as a bonus challenge to help with the treasure location. Now, he also says in an interview that there's more to there's more in that chapter than just those games, possibly alluding to you may not need those games to solve the clues to where the treasure box is hidden, which would be nice, right? For some people that don't do as well with that. So that is really an overview on the chapter. In the next video, we will get it more into the granular detail of the chapter and try to really pinpoint what JCB is trying to say about these clues, right? So we want to use this cognitive loading theory, or at least keep it in our mind when we're going through the chapter, because there's a lot of stuff in there. As I read through it, I think maybe not all of it's necessary. Maybe it's there to throw us off. You know, when we are presented with, a fear, if we're out hiking looking for a treasure box and there's a sign that says beware of the bears around, and we hear something in the woods, and we see a silhouette of a bear, we run. We don't sit there and check to see how much teeth the bear has or what color his eyes are. We just run. We don't have the processing power to analyze all of this stuff in the heat of the moment. That being said, there's a lot of stuff in this chapter, and maybe not all of it's what we need, or maybe it is, but we really have to train ourselves to look deep into this. So with that, I thank you again for watching. Stick around, come back for part 2 of Past and Future Box. Thank you.